pulled into the parking lot of the massive warehouse around 10:30 that night. The rain was coming down steady, drumming against my windshield as I sat there for a moment, staring at the building. I'd been working night shifts here for about 8 months now, ever since I dropped out of college. The pay wasn't great, but the schedule worked for me because I took care of my younger sister during the day while our mom worked 2 jobs. Tonight I was doing inventory alone in the back section because my usual partner Marcus called in sick. As I grabbed my jacket and badge from the passenger seat, I noticed the parking lot was emptier than usual. Just 2 cars. My beat-up Honda and the supervisor's truck. I took a breath and headed for the employee entrance, rain soaking through my shoulders before I even made it to the door. Inside, I found Mike in the office finishing up some paperwork. He was a decent guy, mid-40s, always looked tired. He glanced up when I walked in. "Hey Jake, Marcus called out sick so you're flying solo tonight." "Yeah, I figured," I said, shaking water off my jacket. Mike stood up and grabbed a clipboard. "I need you to do inventory in the back corner. Seasonal items and overstock. Should take you most of the shift, but it's not too complicated." We walked through the warehouse together, our footsteps echoing on the concrete floor. The place was huge, maybe 200,000 square feet, with rows and rows of metal shelving units that stretched up 20 feet high. Mike led me to the far back corner where they stored Christmas decorations, patio furniture, and random overstock items. The overhead lights were motion-activated back here, and whole sections sat in darkness until we walked through them. "Fair warning," Mike said. "The security cameras in this section have been glitchy. Technicians coming tomorrow to fix them." "Great," I muttered. "You got your phone on you?" "Yeah." "All right, I'm heading out. Lock up when you're done and badge out through the side door." He handed me the clipboard and scanner. "You'll be fine. It's just counting boxes." Mike left a few minutes later, and I heard his truck start up outside. Then it was just me and the hum of the ventilation system. I started working my way down the first aisle, scanning barcodes and counting boxes on the shelves. The motion sensor lights clicked on as I moved, creating this weird effect where I was always walking into darkness that would suddenly brighten. It was almost midnight when I first heard it. A rolling noise, like a pallet jack or a cart moving somewhere in the darkness beyond my section. I stopped counting and listened. "Hello, Mike, did you come back?" No response. The warehouse was absolutely massive and sounds carried strangely in here, bouncing off metal and concrete. I shrugged it off and went back to my clipboard. Probably just the building settling or the ventilation system making weird noises. I climbed up on a ladder to count boxes on the top shelf, my scanner beeping with each item. About 20 minutes passed and I moved to the next aisle. I was up on the ladder again when I heard it a second time. The rolling sound, closer now. Definitely a pallet jack or something with wheels moving on concrete. I climbed down quickly, my heart beating a little faster, and walked toward where I thought the sound came from. The overhead lights in the next section were off. I walked into the aisle and they flickered on with a soft click. Nobody there, just rows of boxes and shelves. But then I noticed something that made me stop. One of the pallet jacks that was usually kept near the loading dock was sitting in the middle of this aisle. I stared at it. That definitely wasn't there when I'd walked through earlier. I walked up to it slowly, looking around. The warehouse was silent except for that constant hum. My phone buzzed in my pocket and I nearly jumped. Text from my sister. "When you coming home?" I texted back quickly. "Late, finish around 7, go to bed." I stood there looking at the pallet jack for another minute, then decided I needed coffee. My nerves were getting to me, and I suddenly wanted to be closer to the front of the building, closer to the exit. The break room was near the main entrance, maybe a 5-minute walk through the warehouse. I headed that way, moving faster than normal, the motion lights clicking on ahead of me and shutting off behind me. Break room, I poured coffee with hands that were shaking more than I wanted to admit. I tried to rationalize what was happening. Maybe Mike had moved that pallet jack before he left. Maybe someone from the loading crew was still here finishing up work. I walked over to the schedule posted on the wall and scanned down the list. My name was the only one scheduled after 11. Nobody else. I pulled out my phone to call Mike, but I barely had any signal. One bar that kept flickering to nothing. The metal building killed reception. I needed to get closer to the front entrance where the signal was better. I walked out of the break room and headed toward the front, passing through the main warehouse floor. This section had better lighting, more open space. I was passing by a section of tall shelving units when something made me stop, just a feeling. I turned and looked down a long dark aisle that stretched back maybe 100 feet. At the very far end, barely visible in the darkness, I saw movement. A shadow shifted between the shelves. My breath caught in my throat. I stood completely still, watching. The motion sensor lights should have turned on if someone was walking back there. They didn't. After a few seconds, nothing else moved. I convinced myself it was my imagination, maybe shadows from my flashlight playing tricks. I kept walking to the front entrance, got 2 bars of signal, and called Mike. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. "Hey Mike, it's Jake. Quick question, is anyone else working tonight? I thought I heard something, just checking, call me back." I hung up and stood there in the fluorescent light near the front doors, drinking my coffee, trying to calm down. After a few minutes, I decided I needed to just finish the inventory as fast as possible and get out of here. I headed back toward my section, walking quickly now, my flashlight in one hand and phone in the other, even though the signal was gone again. When I got back to where I'd been working, my clipboard was gone. I'd left it right on top of a box. I remembered specifically setting it down there. Now it wasn't there. My heart started pounding hard. I looked around frantically, my flashlight beam sweeping across the shelves. Then I spotted it on the concrete floor about 15 feet away, papers scattered around it. I picked it up with trembling hands, gathering the papers. That's when I heard the footsteps, not far away. Deliberate, heavy footsteps on concrete. They stopped when I stopped moving. I held my breath, standing completely still in the silence, nothing but the hum of the vents. Then the footsteps started again, coming from the aisle parallel to mine. I couldn't see anyone because the tall shelves blocked my view, but I could hear them clearly, walking slowly, methodically. I took a few steps forward. The footsteps moved too, matching my pace. I stopped. They stopped. My mind was racing. Someone was definitely in here with me, and they were following me, mirroring my movements from the next aisle over. I needed to get to the front entrance. I started walking quickly toward the main floor, my footsteps echoing loudly. Behind me, the other footsteps sped up too. I could hear them clearly now, heavy boots on concrete, no longer trying to be subtle. My walk turned into a jog, and then I was running. The footsteps behind me broke into a run too, pounding on the floor, getting closer. I didn't look back. I just ran through the maze of shelving units, my breath coming in gasps, the scanner still clutched in my hand. Suddenly, all the overhead lights in the section behind me shut off at once, plunging that entire area into complete darkness. The footsteps continued in the dark, fast and heavy. My flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran. I reached the main floor and sprinted toward the front entrance, but then I stopped short and my blood ran cold. The entrance was chained from the inside. A thick chain wrapped through the door handles with a padlock. Mike must have locked it for security when he left, assuming I'd exit through the side employee door like always. But that door was all the way on the other side of the building, back toward where those footsteps were coming from. I spun around, breathing hard. The warehouse stretched out before me, enormous and full of shadows. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear movement, shuffling sounds, closer now. I ducked behind a forklift and crouched down low, trying to control my breathing. My phone showed no signal. I was trapped inside this building with someone. Minutes passed like hours. The sounds had stopped. The silence was somehow worse than the footsteps. Then I heard something that made my stomach drop and my skin crawl. My name. A man's voice, calm and steady, calling out from somewhere in the darkness. Jake. Nobody should know my name. My name tag was in my locker. I never wore it during night shifts. Jake, I know you're here. The voice echoed through the warehouse. I pressed myself against the forklift, my hand over my mouth to keep quiet. How did he know my name? Who was this? I realized staying hidden wasn't going to work. Whoever this was, they knew where I was, they knew my name, and they were playing with me. I remembered there was an emergency exit on the east wall near the loading dock. It would trigger an alarm, but that was exactly what I needed right now. I needed that alarm. I needed police. I took a deep breath, said a silent prayer, and ran. I ran harder than I'd ever run in my life, weaving between shelves and equipment, my shoes slapping on concrete. Behind me, I heard the footsteps again immediately, fast and heavy, giving chase. I didn't look back. I just focused on that red emergency exit sign glowing in the distance. I was almost there, maybe 30 feet away, when my foot caught on something. A wooden pallet left on the floor. I went down hard, my hands breaking my fall, the scanner and flashlight skittering away across the concrete. Pain shot through my knee and palms. I scrambled to my feet, limping now. The footsteps were right behind me, so close I could hear the breathing. I lunged for the emergency exit door and threw my whole body weight against the push bar. The alarm was deafening, a piercing wail that echoed through the entire warehouse. The door flew open and I burst out into the rainy night, stumbling down the concrete steps. Cold rain hit my face. I ran across the parking lot to my car, fumbling in my pockets for my keys. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped them on the wet pavement. I snatched them up, got the door open, threw myself inside and slammed the locks down. I started the engine with shaking hands and tore out of the parking lot, tires squealing. I didn't slow down until I was a mile away on the main road. Then I pulled over on the shoulder, my whole body shaking, and called 911. 911, what's your emergency? Someone was in the warehouse with me. They chased me. I'm the only one supposed to be there. I work at Patterson Warehouse on Industrial Drive. Are you safe now, sir? Yes, I'm in my car. I got out. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. The police arrived at the warehouse within 15 minutes. I met them there, 3 patrol cars with lights flashing. I refused to go back inside alone. I stood in the rain with one of the officers while I explained everything that happened. 4 officers searched the entire building with flashlights and weapons drawn. I waited outside, watching the lights move inside through the windows. After about 20 minutes, they came back out. The senior officer walked over to me. We found that the side employee door was unlocked from the inside, slightly open. Someone was definitely in there with you. Did you find anyone? No, whoever it was, they're gone now. We went inside together and they showed me what they'd found. My clipboard was still where I dropped it. My coffee mug sat in the break room, still slightly warm. But there was something else that made all of us go quiet. In the back section where I'd been working, written in the dust on one of the metal shelves, were the words "I see you" in large letters. Below it was a handprint, clear and deliberate, pressed into the dust. The officer took photos of everything. They dusted the handprint for fingerprints and checked the security cameras, but Mike was right. They were down in that section. Nothing recorded. Mike arrived about 30 minutes later, rushing in looking shocked and apologetic. Jake, I'm so sorry about the front door. I always lock it. I had no idea someone was in here. Are you okay? I'm fine. I just want to go home. An investigation was launched over the following days. They checked employment records, recent terminations, anyone who might have had access to the building or a grudge against the company. They interviewed the whole staff. Nothing conclusive came up. No fingerprints in the system. No sign of forced entry. Whoever had been in there either had a key or knew how to get in. The warehouse installed new security measures after that. Cameras everywhere, including the back sections. New locks on all the doors. And a new policy that required 2 people minimum on night shifts. No more working alone. I transferred to day shift immediately. I still work there but never alone, and I never go back to that section if I can help it. Sometimes at night when I'm home, lying in bed, I think about that voice calling my name in the darkness, calm and steady like he knew me, like he'd been watching me for a while. I wonder who it was, how they knew my name, and what would have happened if I hadn't made it to that emergency exit. I never got those answers. The case remains open but unsolved. But I know one thing for certain. I was never alone in that warehouse that night. Someone was there with me in the dark, and whoever they were, they wanted me to know it. My name is Brandon, and I work as a security guard at the Riverside office complex just outside the city. I'm 24 years old, and I've been doing this job for about 8 months now. The pay is decent, and honestly, most nights are pretty quiet. I work the overnight shift, which runs from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., 3 nights a week. The building itself is 12 stories tall, mostly filled with small companies renting office space. Nothing too exciting ever happens there. Usually I work alongside Marcus, this older guy who's been doing security for like 15 years. He knows every corner of that building. But this particular Tuesday night, Marcus called in sick around 10:30 p.m. My supervisor, Dave, called me right after to confirm I'd be working alone. I told him it was fine. I'd done solo shifts a few times before, and it never bothered me. I clocked in at 10:45 p.m., grabbed my coffee from the break room, and settled into the security desk in the main lobby. Everything felt completely normal. At 11:15 p.m., I started my first patrol of the night. The routine is pretty straightforward. I take the elevator up to the top floor and work my way down, checking that all the office doors are locked and that nobody's left any lights on or equipment running. Floors 1 through 5 were totally quiet, just dark hallways and locked doors, exactly how they should be. But when I got to the 6th floor, I heard something. It was a soft tapping sound coming from the far end of the hallway. I walked toward it slowly, listening carefully. The sound seemed to be coming from Suite 604. I reached the door and stood there for a moment. The office was dark inside and the door was definitely locked. I figured it was probably just the pipes or the air conditioning system making noise. Old buildings do that. I continued up to floors 7 through 12 and everything else checked out fine. By 12:20 a.m., I was back at the security desk, watching the camera feeds and finishing my coffee. That's when I noticed something weird. The camera feed for the 6th floor flickered with static for a few seconds, then went back to normal. I made a note of it but didn't think much of it at the time. Around 1:30 a.m., the desk phone started ringing. I looked at the caller ID display, and it showed an internal extension from the 6th floor. I picked it up right away. There was nothing but static on the line, a harsh crackling noise that lasted maybe 5 seconds before the call disconnected. I pulled up the building log on my computer to double-check. According to the system, nobody had been in the building past 9 p.m. Everyone had clocked out or badged out through the main entrance. So who just called from the 6th floor? I sat there staring at the phone for a minute, feeling this strange unease starting to creep in. I decided I needed to go back up and check that floor again. I took the elevator up, and I swear the air felt colder than usual inside that metal box. When the doors opened on 6, the hallway was dark except for the red exit signs glowing at either end. I walked down to Suite 604 again. Door was still closed and locked, but now I could hear something else. It sounded like typing, like someone was in there working on a keyboard. I knocked on the door. Security, is anyone in there? The typing stopped immediately. Complete silence. I tried the door handle, but it wouldn't budge. This particular suite required a special key card that only management had. I went back downstairs and checked the tenant list. Suite 604 had been vacant for 3 months. Nobody was renting it. By 2:45 a.m., I was getting seriously worried. I tried calling Dave, my supervisor, but he didn't pick up. I left him a voicemail explaining what was happening. I went back to watching the cameras, but the 6th floor feed kept glitching out every few minutes. Then I noticed something on the 8th floor camera. A shadow moved across the hallway, quick and deliberate. I rewound the footage and watched it again. Someone or something had definitely walked past that camera, but I never saw anyone enter the stairwell or take the elevator. That was impossible. I decided to check the 8th floor myself, but this time I took the stairs instead of the elevator. I needed to move quietly. The 8th floor hallway was just as dark as the 6th. All the office doors were closed. But then I saw it. Suite 812 had a faint light coming from underneath the door. I approached slowly and heard whispering. It was too quiet to make out words, but someone was definitely in there talking. I knocked. "Security, open up." The whispering stopped instantly. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, the door was unlocked. I pushed it open carefully. The room was completely empty, just some old desks and chairs covered in dust. But sitting on one of the desks was a computer, and it was turned on. The screen was bright, showing a text editor with the same sentence typed over and over again. "He is watching. He is watching. He is watching." My heart started pounding hard in my chest. I shut down the computer immediately and got out of that room as fast as I could. I practically ran back to the security desk. It was 3:20 a.m. now, and I was done pretending everything was fine. I picked up the desk phone to call the police, but there was no dial tone. The line was completely dead. I grabbed my cell phone from my pocket. No signal. That didn't make sense. I always had full bars on the first floor. I tried the main entrance doors, thinking maybe I should just leave and call for help from outside. The electronic locks wouldn't respond. I swiped my key card multiple times. Nothing. The doors wouldn't open. I was locked inside the building. Panic started setting in. I looked back at the camera monitors. Now the feeds for floors 3, 6, and 8 were all showing static. Then I heard it. The elevator. The motor was running, and I could hear the cables moving. I looked at the floor indicator above the elevator doors. It was coming down from the 12th floor. 12, 11, 10, 9. I watched it descend all the way to the first floor. The doors slid open with a soft ding. Nobody stepped out, but I heard footsteps. Clear, deliberate footsteps walking out of the empty elevator and heading toward the back hallway that led to the server room. I couldn't see anyone, but I could hear them moving away from me. I grabbed my flashlight and baton from the desk. My hands were shaking, but I forced myself to follow the sound. The back hallway was darker and narrower than the main corridors. The footsteps had stopped somewhere up ahead. I moved slowly, sweeping my flashlight beam across the walls. The steps had stopped right in front of the server room door. This room housed all the electrical systems and network equipment for the entire building. It was always supposed to be locked. Only the tech team had access, but the door was cracked open about 6 inches. I pushed it wider with my foot and stepped inside. The room was dark except for the blinking green and blue LED lights from all the servers and switches. Then I heard breathing, heavy, labored breathing coming from the far corner. I aimed my flashlight and saw him. A man standing with his back to me, wearing a black hoodie with the hood pulled up. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You need to leave now." He didn't respond. He didn't even move. I stepped closer, raising my baton. "I'm calling the police. You need to come with me right now." That's when he started laughing. It was a low, unsettling sound. He slowly turned around, and I saw he was wearing a black ski mask covering his entire face. In his hand, he was holding a phone, and the screen was showing a live video feed. It was camera footage from the security desk. He'd been watching me this whole time. He spoke in a calm, almost amused voice. "Your supervisor sent me. This is a test." I was so confused. "What test? Nobody told me about any test." The man started walking toward me, and I backed up, holding the baton between us. "You failed," he said. "You should have called for backup earlier." I shook my head. "I tried. The phones don't work." He tilted his head. "That's the point. You should have left the building." Suddenly, the lights in the server room turned on, flooding everything with harsh fluorescent brightness. I heard footsteps behind me and spun around. Dave, my supervisor, walked in with 2 other people wearing suits, professional looking. Dave held up his hand. "Stand down, Brandon. This is indeed a test." I was so confused I couldn't even form words. "What test? Nobody told me anything about this." Dave explained that the company had hired an outside security firm to run a drill. They wanted to test how security guards responded during emergency situations. The man in the ski mask was an actor they'd hired. Everything that happened tonight had been staged. The glitching cameras, the dead phone lines, the locked doors, it was all simulated to see how I'd react. The actor pulled off his mask and gave me an apologetic smile. Sorry, man, just doing my job. But something didn't feel right. I looked at Dave. What about the typing sounds, the whispers, the message on the computer? Dave nodded. Sound effects played through hidden speakers. Pretty advanced setup, right? I wasn't convinced. What about Suite 604? That room's been empty for months. Dave said, we used it for the drill setup. Had to stage a few things. It was 4:30 a.m. by the time everyone left. Dave and the security assessment team packed up their equipment and headed out. I sat back down at the security desk, trying to process everything that had just happened. The systems were all back to normal now. The phones worked. The doors unlocked. Everything was fine. But I couldn't shake this feeling. Something still felt off. I pulled up the camera footage from earlier in the night and rewound it to 1:30 a.m., right around the time I first heard the typing in Suite 604. I watched the sixth floor feed carefully, and that's when I saw it. There was someone in that office, but it wasn't the actor. This was someone else. A figure I could barely make out in the grainy footage. They appeared for just a few seconds before the feed went static. According to Dave, the actor hadn't arrived until after 3 a.m. So who was in Suite 604 at 1:30? I picked up the phone and called Dave. He answered on the third ring, sounding tired. I asked him if anyone else had been part of the drill, anyone he hadn't mentioned. He said no, just the one actor. I didn't tell him what I'd seen on the footage. I was too afraid he'd think I was losing it. I deleted the clip and tried to forget about it. But I couldn't. From that night on, I never volunteered to work solo shifts again. I always made sure Marcus or someone else was scheduled with me. And every time I walk past Suite 604, even now, I get this feeling. Like someone standing just on the other side of that door, watching me through the dark glass. Maybe not everything that happened that night was part of the drill. Maybe some things in that building can't be explained. I guess I'll never really know for sure. I worked the night shift as a security guard at a 5-story parking garage in downtown. My shift runs from 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., and most nights are pretty quiet. There are usually about 10 or 12 cars left overnight, mostly belonging to people who live in the apartments nearby or folks who had too much to drink and took a cab home. Tonight seemed like it was going to be one of those normal nights. I clocked in at 11, grabbed my coffee from the break room, and settled into the security desk on the first floor. The desk sits right by the entrance, with a wall of monitors showing camera feeds from all 5 levels. My job is simple. Every hour I do a walking patrol through each floor, check for anything unusual, make sure all the cars are secure, and return to the desk. The rest of the time I sit and watch the monitors. It gets lonely sometimes, being the only person in this massive concrete structure, but the pay is decent, and I can study between patrols. I was preparing for my first patrol at midnight, finishing my coffee and checking the monitors one more time before heading out. At 12:15, I started my first round. I took the stairs from the first floor up to the second level. The stairwell is narrow, and the sound of my footsteps echoed off the concrete walls. When I pushed open the door to the second floor, the space opened up into rows of parked cars under dim fluorescent lights. About half the lights were out, creating these pockets of darkness between the functioning ones. I walked down the center lane, checking each row as I passed. The garage was silent except for my footsteps and the distant hum of traffic from the street below. I was about halfway through when I heard footsteps behind me. Not echoes of my own steps, but different ones, heavier. I stopped walking and turned around. The footsteps stopped too. I looked down the lane but saw nothing except parked cars and shadows. I stood there for a few seconds listening. Nothing. I figured it was just the acoustics of the garage playing tricks on me. These concrete structures make weird sounds. I continued walking, checking the rest of the floor. When I reached the far end, I looked over the ledge down to the first floor. That is when I saw her. A woman in a long, dark coat standing near my security desk. She had her back to me and was just standing there, not moving. My desk was maybe 40 feet below where I stood. I called down to her. "Excuse me, the garage is closed to pedestrians after 11. She did not respond. Did not turn around, just stood there. I called again, louder this time. "Ma'am, you need to leave. This is a private garage." Still nothing. I ran back to the stairwell and rushed down the stairs. When I burst through the door to the first floor, she was gone. I looked around, checking behind the desk near the entrance by the elevator. No one. The entrance gate was still closed and locked. I had not heard it open. I walked to the gate and checked the lock, secure. I went back to the desk and pulled up the camera footage, rewinding to a few minutes ago. I watched myself on the second floor, then switched to the first floor camera. There was no one near my desk. No woman in a coat. Nothing. I sat down, confused. The lighting on the second floor creates shadows, and maybe I had seen one of those shadows and my tired brain interpreted it as a person. That had to be it. I drank some water and decided to continue my patrol. I went up to the third floor. A few cars parked near the elevator, everything normal. Fourth floor, same thing. When I reached the fifth floor, the top level, it was almost completely dark. This floor is open air, no roof, just the night sky above. Only a few lights work up here, and the moonlight provided most of the visibility. I did a quick check and headed back down. By the time I returned to the desk, I had almost forgotten about the woman. At 2 a.m., I took my lunch break. Behind the security desk, there is a small room, barely bigger than a closet, with a table, a chair, a small refrigerator, and a sink. I went inside and closed the door. I sat down and unwrapped my sandwich, scrolling through my phone while I ate. The room felt stuffy, so I turned on the small fan in the corner. I sat there for about 20 minutes, finishing my food and checking social media. I felt tired, that late-night exhaustion starting to set in. I stood up and went to the sink to splash some water on my face. As I dried off with a paper towel, I heard something outside, a sound like a car door closing. It was muffled but distinct. I paused, listening. The garage was silent again. Sounds echo strangely in here, and sometimes noises from the street carry up through the levels. I figured it was nothing. I sat back down for another 5 minutes, then decided I should get back to work. I tossed my trash and opened the door. I stepped out of the break room and started toward the stairwell to begin another patrol. I had just reached the stairs when I heard footsteps above me. Fast footsteps, like someone running. I froze, my hand on the stairwell door. The footsteps stopped. My heart started pounding. I stood there, barely breathing, listening. Silence. I slowly pulled the door open and stepped into the stairwell. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. I climbed the stairs quietly, trying not to make noise. When I reached the second floor landing, I carefully opened the door just enough to peek through. The second floor stretched out before me, rows of cars under those dim lights. And then I saw her, the same woman from before, standing between two cars about 30 feet away. But this time she was facing me, looking right at me. She wore a dark coat that went down to her knees, and her hair hung around her face. Even from this distance, I could see she was staring directly at the door where I stood. My throat went dry. "Who are you?" I called out. "How did you get in here?" She did not answer. She just started walking toward me, not running, just walking at a steady pace. That was somehow worse. I let the door close and ran back down the stairs, my boots clanging on the metal steps. I hit the first floor at full speed and sprinted to the security desk. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands. Behind me, I heard the stairwell door bang open. I looked back and saw her coming through, moving faster now. I ran toward the vehicle entrance gate, but then remembered it only opens with the button at the desk. I could not get to it in time. She was already crossing the first floor toward me. I changed direction and ran for the emergency exit stairwell on the opposite side of the building. My legs burned as I pushed through the door and started climbing. I could hear her behind me, her footsteps echoing in the stairwell, getting closer. I went up past the second floor, then the third, not stopping. My lungs ached and my legs felt like they would give out, but I kept going. I could hear her below me. Maybe one floor down. I reached the fourth floor and kept climbing. Fifth floor. The door at the top led to the roof level. I burst through it and found myself on the open-air top floor of the garage. The cold night air hit my face. I ran across the concrete surface, looking for another way down. On the far side of the roof, I found what I was looking for, an external fire escape, a metal staircase that zigzagged down the outside of the building. I looked back and saw the door I had come through swing open. She stepped out onto the roof. I did not wait. I climbed over the railing and started down the fire escape. The metal stairs rattled under my feet as I descended as fast as I dared. Above me, I heard the railing creak as she climbed over and started down after me. Stairs shook with both our weights. I went down 2 flights, then 3, my hands gripping the cold railings. My phone was still in my pocket, bouncing against my leg. 4 flights down, 5. I could see the street below now. The metal stairs ended about 8 feet above the sidewalk. I climbed over the last railing and dropped down, hitting the pavement hard. Pain shot through my ankles, but I got up and ran. I ran down the street, past closed storefronts and parked cars until I was a full block away. Then I ducked behind a parked van and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I dialed 911 and tried to catch my breath while it rang. 911, what is your emergency? The operator answered. I am at the 5th Street parking garage, I managed to say between gasps. There is someone in the building. She chased me. I am the security guard. I need help. The police arrived about 10 minutes later. I met them on the street and explained everything. 2 officers went into the garage while another stayed with me. I was still breathing hard, adrenaline coursing through me. After about 15 minutes, the officers came back out. She is gone, one of them said. But we found how she got in. They led me back inside. We went around to the side of the building where there is a service door used by maintenance staff. The lock was broken, the metal door frame bent where someone had pried it open. We checked the security footage, the officer said. She came in through this door at 11:45. You started your shift at 11, right? I nodded. So she was already inside when you started, he continued. Probably hiding somewhere while you did your rounds. We went back inside to the security desk and the officers pulled up the camera footage. I watched the screen as they fast-forwarded through the recordings. There she was, entering through the service door at 11:45 just as they said. The footage showed her moving quickly through the first floor, then disappearing into the stairwell. She must have gone up to one of the higher floors, one officer said. She was waiting, but waiting for what? I asked. The officer shrugged. Hard to say. Could be someone with mental health issues. Could be a homeless person looking for shelter. But the fact that she chased you, that is concerning. We went up to the 2nd floor and the officers searched the area where I had seen her. Near a concrete pillar they found something. A large kitchen knife about 8 inches long lying on the ground. The officer picked it up with a gloved hand and put it in an evidence bag. She dropped this when she chased you, he said. You are lucky you ran. I felt my stomach turn. I had been alone in this garage with someone carrying a knife. Someone who had been hiding, waiting. The officers searched the rest of the building but found no sign of her. She probably ran off when you escaped, one officer told me. We will increase patrols in this area tonight. Do you want to file a report? I nodded. We went back down and I gave my statement, describing everything that happened. The officers took photos of the broken door and collected the knife as evidence. By the time they finished, it was almost 4 in the morning. My supervisor arrived after I called him and he told me to go home for the rest of the night. We will have someone else cover your shift, he said. Take tomorrow off too. Get some rest. I drove home as the sun started to rise, my hands still trembling on the steering wheel. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door behind me and sat on my couch. I could not sleep. Every sound in the building made me jump. I kept thinking about that woman, the way she had looked at me, the way she had chased me through the garage. Who was she? What did she want? The police never found her. I checked the news over the next few days, but there were no reports of anyone matching her description being arrested. It was like she had vanished. My supervisor called me 2 days later and asked if I wanted to come back to work. I told him I would, but only if they assigned a second guard to work the night shift with me. He agreed. Now there are 2 of us working overnight. We do the patrols together and one person always stays at the desk. The company also fixed the service door, installing a new lock and an alarm system. I still work the night shift at that garage. I have never seen that woman again. But I never let my guard down. Every time I do a patrol, I check every corner, every shadow. I always carry my phone in my hand, ready to call for help. And I never ever work alone. Sometimes I think about that night and how differently it could have ended. If I had not heard her footsteps, if I had not run when I did, if that fire escape had not been there. I try not to dwell on it, but the memory stays with me. Working overnight security, you expect quiet nights, maybe the occasional false alarm. You do not expect to be hunted through an empty parking garage by a stranger with a knife. That night changed how I see my job. I am more careful now, more alert. And I have learned that even in places that seem safe, you can never really know who might be watching, waiting in the darkness.